While European settlers were dying from starvation eating civilized foods, Native American tribes thrived on meals that broke every rule colonists believed about nutrition. What's shocking is that these foods prevented every disease killing thousands of Europeans, yet settlers refused to try them. Let's start with the most legendary of them all. Pemmican was basically the ultimate energy bar, thousands of years before anyone ever thought of protein powder. Plains tribes made it by taking dried meat from bison, elk, or deer and pounding it into powder. Then they mixed it with rendered animal fat and dried berries. It packed more nutrition per pound than a modern energy bar and lasted longer than most relationships. The genius wasn't just in what went into pemmican, but how long it lasted. We're talking months, sometimes years without spoiling. No refrigeration needed. 1 pound of this stuff packed over 3,000 calories. That's enough energy to power a person for days, compressed into something smaller than a sandwich. Plains tribes carried pemmican on long hunting trips and stored it for harsh winters. When food was scarce and the weather turned deadly, this was what stood between life and death. The fat provided essential calories for warmth. The protein kept muscles strong. Making pemmican required perfect timing and technique. The meat had to be dried just right, mess up the moisture content, and your winter food supply turned into summer poison. Yet there's something even more incredible about how simple plants could work together. Three Sisters stew brought together corn, beans, and squash in what might be history's first example of companion planting genius. These three crops didn't just grow well together, they actually helped each other survive. The corn provided a natural pole for beans to climb. The beans fixed nitrogen in the soil, feeding the corn and squash. Meanwhile, the squash spread across the ground, keeping moisture in and weeds out. It was agricultural teamwork that would make modern farmers jealous. Eastern woodlands tribes like the Iroquois and Cherokee built their entire agricultural system around this trio. When combined into a stew, these three ingredients created a nutritionally complete meal. The Three Sisters basically created a balanced diet before anyone knew what balanced nutrition meant. The corn provided energy through complex carbohydrates. The beans delivered protein that bodies needed to build and repair muscle. But the brilliance went deeper than nutrition. This combination could be grown reliably year after year without depleting the soil. These tribes had mastered sustainable farming while other cultures were still burning through their soil. Yet even this agricultural marvel had to compete with foods that required no farming at all. Acorn mush turned one of nature's most abundant nuts into a dietary staple, but getting there required serious dedication. California tribes like the Miwok and Yokuts perfected a process that transformed bitter, inedible acorns into nutritious food. The leaching process was where the magic happened. They basically had to wash their food for days to make it edible. Talk about high-maintenance ingredients. Ground acorn meal got placed in specially woven baskets. Then families poured water through it repeatedly until all the tannins washed away. It was like doing laundry for your dinner, except you actually wanted to eat the result. Once processed, the acorn meal was boiled into a thick porridge or mush. Different oak species produced different flavors and nutritional profiles. Here's what made this food source incredibly reliable. While crops could fail due to drought or pests, oak trees produced acorns year after year. Let's not forget the social aspect. Women competed to produce the finest acorn meal, the original food competition show, except the judges were their hungry families. But while some tribes were perfecting plant-based nutrition, others were mastering the art of cooking fresh catches. Fire-roasted fish represented the ultimate in fresh, simple cooking that maximized both flavor and nutrition. Pacific Northwest and Great Lakes tribes had access to incredible varieties: salmon, trout, sturgeon, catfish, and they developed techniques that would make modern chefs jealous. The timing had to be perfect. Cook too little and you risked foodborne illness. Cook too much and you lost precious oils and nutrients. Fish cooking was high-stakes grilling where underdone meant sick and overdone meant hungry. Fresh fish provided complete proteins containing all essential amino acids human bodies couldn't make on their own. Fish were basically swimming vitamin pills, except they actually tasted good and didn't come with warning labels. Different fishing methods provided different dining experiences. Salmon runs meant feast times when entire communities could gorge on fresh fish. Consider the cooking process itself. It was often ceremonial. Cooking fresh fish was dinner and entertainment rolled into one, with the added thrill of not burning your meal. While fish provided excellent nutrition in water-rich areas, desert tribes had to get creative with entirely different ingredients. Nopal cactus salad proved that even the spikiest plants could become gourmet food with the right knowledge. Apache and Pueblo peoples in desert regions turned prickly pear cactus pads into a nutritious, hydrating meal that helped them thrive. Removing the spines required skill and patience. Preparing cactus for dinner meant carefully disarming your vegetables before you could eat them. Once cleaned, the pads could be sliced and prepared in various ways, boiled until tender, roasted over coals for a smoky flavor, or even eaten raw when young and fresh. The nutritional benefits were impressive for a desert plant. Nopal pads provided high levels of fiber, vitamin C, and crucial hydration in environments where water was scarce. Cactus pads were basically nature's sports drink, except they came with built-in security systems. Fresh nopal had a slightly tart lemony flavor that made it surprisingly pleasant to eat. Even in scorching desert heat, people found ways to harvest and prepare this spiny lifesaver. Yet in the harshest climates on Earth, other tribes relied on foods that would seem extreme by any standard. Seal and whale blubber kept Arctic tribes alive in conditions that would kill most people within hours. Inuit and other coastal Arctic peoples consumed this high-fat food raw, boiled, or fermented depending on the season and circumstances. In the Arctic, blubber wasn't just food. It was liquid calories that doubled as heating fuel. The fat content was astronomical by modern standards, but absolutely essential for Arctic survival. A single serving provided thousands of calories and crucial omega-3 fatty acids. Eating blubber was like consuming concentrated winter survival in edible form. Raw consumption might sound extreme, but cooking required fuel, which was scarce in treeless Arctic regions. Then there's fermented blubber, which represents advanced food preservation technology. Fermented blubber was prehistoric probiotics that came from whales instead of health food stores. The fermentation process created beneficial bacteria that aided digestion and produced additional vitamins essential for health. Different preparation methods provided variety. Some blubber was cut into small cubes and eaten like candy. But while Arctic peoples mastered the art of fat consumption, tribes in more temperate regions developed sophisticated grain-based cuisines. Wild rice and duck soup represented the perfect marriage of aquatic resources that Great Lakes tribes like the Ojibwe and Menominee turned into culinary art. Wild rice wasn't actually rice at all, but the seeds of aquatic grass that grew in shallow lakes and rivers. The harvesting process was like a carefully choreographed water ballet. Two people worked each canoe. One paddled slowly through the rice beds, while the other used wooden sticks to bend the grass stalks and knock ripe seeds into the canoe bottom. Harvesting wild rice meant competing with ducks for the same floating buffet. When combined with duck or other waterfowl, the soup became a complete protein source with complex carbohydrates and essential minerals. Wild rice and duck soup was basically a complete meal swimming around in the same lake. The nutritional profile was impressive. Wild rice contained more protein than regular rice, plus significant amounts of lysine, fiber, and B vitamins. Wild rice was a superfood before superfoods were trendy, and it actually filled you up. However, some foods were considered so special they were reserved for the most important moments. Fresh bison liver was the ultimate prize after a successful hunt, eaten raw and shared among plains tribes in what could only be described as prehistoric fine dining. Fresh liver was like winning the nutritional lottery, packed with more vitamins than a modern supplement aisle. The liver had to be consumed immediately after the kill to maintain peak nutritional value and safety. Fresh liver provided massive amounts of iron, vitamin A, B12, and complete proteins in concentrations that would make modern vitamin supplements look weak. Bison liver was basically nature's multivitamin, except it came from a 2,000-pound animal instead of a plastic bottle. The sharing of fresh liver followed strict social protocols. Getting first dibs on fresh liver was the ancient equivalent of premium seating. The most successful hunters, elders, pregnant women, and children often received the first portions to ensure proper nutrition. But here's where it gets interesting. The ritual aspects were as important as the nutrition. Eating the liver of a freshly killed bison was seen as taking on some of the animal's strength and spirit. But when fresh organs weren't available, tribes had other ways to extract maximum nutrition. Bone broth represented the ultimate in waste, not want, not cooking, turning what others might discard into liquid nutrition that could sustain life during the leanest times. Plains and woodland tribes cracked open large bones from bison and deer to access the marrow, then boiled everything for hours to extract collagen, fats, and minerals. They turned bones into soup, the original bone-to-broth recycling program. The cooking vessels varied by tribe and region. Some used clay pots, others lined pits with stones, and some even used animal stomachs as natural pressure cookers. Animal stomachs made perfect biodegradable cooking pots that came pre-seasoned. The resulting broth was liquid gold in terms of nutrition. Different bones produced different flavors and nutritional profiles. Making bone broth was like performing alchemy, except instead of turning lead into gold, they turned skeletons into soup. The long cooking process broke down collagen into gelatin and extracted minerals from the bones themselves. Storage methods allowed families to preserve bone broth for future use. Some groups concentrated it into thick gel that could be dried and stored for months. While bone broth extracted nutrition from animals, other tribes mastered extracting sweetness from trees. Maple syrup and cakes represented one of nature's sweetest survival strategies, transforming tree sap into concentrated energy that Northeast tribes perfected over centuries. Trees basically made their own energy drinks, except these were pure liquid sugar with no artificial ingredients. The work was intense and time-sensitive. Each tree could produce several gallons of sap per day during peak season, but it took about 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of finished syrup. Maple syrup production had a 40-to-1 conversion rate. Talk about concentrated sweetness. Fresh maple syrup provided quick energy through natural sugars, but it could also be processed further into solid cakes or granules for storage. Maple syrup was portable dessert that doubled as survival food, sweetness you could actually depend on. But let's not overlook the community aspect. The maple harvest was a celebration that marked the end of winter and the beginning of spring. But while some tribes were mastering sweetness, others were unlocking the nutritional secrets hidden in common grains. Nixtamalized corn was basically prehistoric food science that solved a deadly nutritional problem most people didn't even know existed. Mesoamerican and southeastern tribes discovered that soaking corn in water mixed with wood ash or lime didn't just change the texture, it literally saved lives by preventing pellagra. They unlocked a secret nutritional code thousands of years before modern science caught up. Without nixtamalization, people who ate mostly corn developed pellagra, which caused skin problems, digestive issues, mental confusion, and eventually death. Nixtamalization was like having a cheat code for corn nutrition, except the stakes were life or death. Indigenous peoples had solved deadly nutritional problems, while other cultures struggled with corn-based diets for centuries. The alkaline treatment released bound niacin, making it available for human digestion and preventing devastating deficiency diseases. The processed corn could be ground into masa, a versatile dough used for tortillas, tamales, or porridge, yet even perfectly processed corn needed to be prepared properly to maximize its benefits. Cornbread cooked in clay pots transformed processed corn into portable, long-lasting sustenance that could feed families and travelers across vast distances. Southeastern and eastern woodland tribes perfected recipes that combined ground cornmeal with water and sometimes animal fat or seeds. Clay pot cornbread was the original energy bar that actually satisfied hunger. The clay pot cooking method was crucial for achieving the right texture and shelf life. The result was dense, durable bread that could withstand travel and storage much better than modern bread. Clay pot baking was like having a portable oven that never needed electricity or gas. Different recipes meant choosing what would keep you alive for weeks of travel. Basic versions used just cornmeal and water for simple sustenance, while enriched versions included animal fat for extra calories and better flavor. Then there's the portability factor, which was game-changing for mobile tribes or hunting parties. Dried cornbread could be rehydrated with water or broth to create quick-filling meals around any campfire during travel. But while cornbread provided portable sustenance, some dishes were designed specifically for feeding large groups efficiently. Pumpkin and wild herb soup represented the ultimate in efficient cooking and nutrition, using the pumpkin itself as both ingredient and cooking vessel. Northeastern tribes harvested large pumpkins in autumn, hollowed them out, filled them with wild herbs, broth, and sometimes meat or beans, then slow-cooked everything over coals. Pumpkins served as biodegradable slow cookers that became part of the meal. The cooking method was pure genius from both practical and nutritional standpoints. Cooking inside a pumpkin meant your pot became part of dinner. As the contents cooked, the pumpkin walls softened and eventually became part of the meal itself, adding their own sweet flavor and nutrients. Fresh pumpkins provided impressive nutritional benefits, especially during autumn when many other foods were becoming scarce. Pumpkin soup was like eating a bowl made of vegetables while getting your vegetables. Wild herbs varied by region, but commonly included things like wild onions, garlic, sage, and various leafy greens. Large pumpkins could feed entire families or small groups, making this an efficient way to prepare communal meals during harvest time. While pumpkin soup made excellent use of autumn harvests, other foods came from completely different sources that required specialized knowledge. Ground nut and root mash turned hidden underground treasures into nutritious, filling meals that sustained eastern woodlands and Pacific Northwest tribes year-round. Finding edible roots required knowing which underground plants fed you and which ones killed you. The ground nut was a particular favorite that produced protein-rich tubers along its root system. Camas roots in Pacific Northwest regions were another crucial food source, but they came with serious risks. Root gathering was like playing nature's version of Russian roulette, except with vegetables. Edible camas looked very similar to death camas, a plant that could kill anyone who mistook one for the other. Camas root identification was literally a life or death skill. No room for guessing. Different seasons provided access to different types of edible roots. Spring brought fresh shoots and tender young roots. Summer allowed for harvesting mature tubers with maximum stored energy. Fall was prime digging time when roots had accumulated nutrients for winter storage. But here's what really mattered. The knowledge of edible root identification was passed down through generations with extreme care. But while individual families perfected their own specialized foods, the most important meals were often the ones that brought entire communities together. Communal stews represented the heart of tribal social life and resource management, bringing together whatever ingredients were available into massive pots that fed entire communities. Communal stews were potluck dinners where everyone brought actual food instead of empty promises. The ingredients varied dramatically depending on location, season, and what the community had successfully hunted or gathered recently. Winter stews used whatever food remained, seasoned with careful rationing and hope. Spring versions might feature fresh fish, early greens, and stored corn from the previous year's harvest. Community cooking was like having a giant shared kitchen, except everyone actually contributed something useful. The nutritional benefits of combining diverse ingredients created more complete nutrition than any single food could provide alone. Beyond nutrition, communal stews served crucial social and cultural functions. Stories were told while the stew cooked, passing down important cultural knowledge to younger generations. Each tribe developed signature flavoring techniques that created distinct regional cuisines focused on survival rather than reviews. The preparation, cooking, and sharing of communal stews reinforced social bonds that held tribal societies together through both abundant and difficult times. But let's not forget the deeper significance. These meals represented more than just sustenance. They were the foundation of community cooperation and cultural continuity. These 15 survival foods demonstrate how indigenous peoples developed sophisticated nutritional knowledge and food preparation techniques that sustained entire civilizations for thousands of years.